So much of what I do is envisioning the reality I want for myself and then saying, go create it, Vanessa. Nobody's handing it to you. Go create the reality you want for yourself. I have a lot of people say, like, I don't know how to make friends. It's like, don't worry about making friends. Go find something you like to do and organize it. If you want to be surrounded by people, you got to make an effort. And I think starting with something you enjoy doing with other people who enjoy doing it is a pretty easy way to start.
Welcome to the GenX Shift podcast, a show for Gen Xers who are navigating some pretty tough transitions and aren't sure how to move forward. I'm your host, Michelle Walter, proud Gen Xer, former lawyer turned entrepreneur, huge Jason Momoa fan, and margarita snob. And I've navigated a lot of transitions in my life, from losing my mom suddenly to a heart attack to starting my own business. But I often did it all on my own because I was too stubborn to ask for help. Now I'm on a mission to give actionable strategies to other Gen Xers so that they can find the confidence, courage, and clarity they need to make a shift. So let's rock and roll. Welcome back, Gen Xers. My conversation this week is a powerful invitation for all my Gen X women, because this is your chance to learn how to step into your true power and autonomy by learning how we can reconnect to ourselves to reestablish the most important relationship we will ever have with ourselves. We're also going to learn how you can start to establish deeper relationships with other women to support ourselves as we enter this next chapter of our lives. So my guest this week is Vanessa Cornell, who I've known for the last 5 years. I had the privilege and the pleasure of getting to be in Vanessa's Nushu community, which we talk about in the episode. And through being in that community, I learned how I could start to step into my power and autonomy and how to reconnect to myself so that I can establish a deeper relationship with myself that provides the foundation for everything else. Vanessa shares a story of coming to her breaking point after working at Goldman Sachs as a successful professional, taking time off for 10 years to raise 5 children, and then despite all outward measures of success, hitting that breaking point where she was just ready to blow up her life. And I know that there are other Gen X women who are approaching or are at that breaking point right now. It was through reaching that breaking point that Vanessa learned to heal from a life where she prioritized everybody else over herself. Her bio reads that her 3 loves in life are herself, her work, and her family. And that is not an accident. Not a lot of women would think to put themselves first. Vanessa has learned how to do that. And she explains why it's so important for Gen X women to reestablish that relationship with ourselves so that we can actually step into the full power of who we are, which it's challenging and it's hard work. Nobody's going to pretend otherwise. And it's a lifelong practice. The good news is that it is possible. And Vanessa shares 3 critical questions that you can start to ask yourself so that you can learn how to do that. And those 3 questions are in the free download that I will link in the show notes that she calls the 5-minute self-care challenge. We talk about Vanessa's work in Nushu and in her new company, Vanessa Cornell, her personal brand, and how we can develop the skill of space holding, which I know is a new word for a lot of Gen Xers. We talk about what that is and why space holding is so important for our relationships, whether it's with teenagers or work colleagues or friends. And Vanessa flips the script on what it means for women to step into their diva era at this stage of life. It's a new outlook, a little bit fresh take on that concept, which really gave me some personal insights that I'm going to use to start stepping into my diva era. So sit back and enjoy this conversation with Vanessa Cornell, and I'll catch you on the other side. Hey, Vanessa, I'm so grateful to get to spend this time with you today on the GenX Shift podcast. So thank you for being here and having this conversation.
Thank you for inviting me here. It's always great to be with you.
It's been a while. We were just catching up a little bit before the call, and I hope that I can reconnect this year is my goal, to reconnect with a lot of folks who I haven't been connecting with as much over the last few years. And you have been one of those people. And I always like to tell listeners how I know my guests. And I was reflecting back this morning, and I first learned about you in 2020 when Rob Bell was doing his virtual book tour in the middle of the pandemic for his book, Everything is Spiritual. And so he connected with you, and you did the virtual book tour in New York City.
Yeah.
And that's how I first heard your name and learned of your work. And I very quickly thought, I want to have more of this woman in my life and the work that she's doing. So I looked into Nushu, which we're going to talk about and get into that in a little bit, and decided that I wanted to go through the facilitator training, and was just thrown into a growth journey that, looking back, was very synchronistic, but at the time I was not expecting. And so I really credit you and Nushu and the community that I met through Nushu with being one of my mentors and one of the big factors for the reason that I've been on the journey that I'm on. I'm just very grateful to you and the work that you're doing in the world.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. The reason I do the work also is to connect with people and people like you, and to be in those spaces makes me get up in the morning. And just being in a space with people who are interested in what I'm interested in and want to talk about it and want to be there for each other in that space is what kind of drives me. And also, I appreciate it because some people, when they share their appreciation, assume that I get it all the time, and I don't necessarily. So it's just nice, it's like if you're out there and you're listening and you have someone you appreciate, maybe just go tell them out loud, because a lot of times we hold that appreciation in our minds and in our hearts, but we don't actually express it. And even if it's someone who you think kind of already knows, it's still really nice to hear it. Feels good. So thank you.
Absolutely. I echo that. Never miss an opportunity to tell somebody how much you appreciate them and how grateful you are for their presence in your life. So I take that message to heart. So we have a lot of ground I want to cover because there's so much amazing work and purpose and mission that you have. So I want to kind of make sure we hit some of the highlights of it anyway. But I want to start by rewinding the tape a little bit and kind of looking back at your trajectory of life, and especially your childhood and growing up, because I think those formative childhood years can really set the foundation for our trajectory later in life. So I'm curious if there are some experiences or memories that you have from when you were growing up in your formative childhood years that you think really contributed to your path in life.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many, but there are a couple I'll talk about here. One is, and I only really reflect on it now, and speaking to a lot of women our age, right? Gen X women, I realize I came from a very stable, loving family, but to a certain extent, I raised myself. I will reflect on things that I went through as a child that didn't occur to me to tell my parents about. Big things that were happening with friends, things that are like not something that a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old should be navigating by herself. But it just really occurred to me that there were so many of these things that I just handled on my own. I just figured out on my own. And I've spoken to so many women of my age, and that was kind of the MO. And it wasn't for a lack of love in my situation. I'm very grateful for the way I was raised. I was raised with love and safety, but parents were just not in conversation with their kids about issues. And there was an unwritten fear of getting in trouble. Like, I can't tell my parents that, they'll kill me. You know that phrase, like, oh my God, my parents will kill me. And so when I'm raising my own children, I have this like deep awareness that I have a level of open dialogue with them that I never had as a kid. And so now as an adult, so much of my practice is saying stuff out loud because so much was unsaid, so much was undiscussed. And then there was this other undercurrent of we don't share our dirty laundry outside of the family. And we don't talk about our feelings. And so I'm kind of coming out of that feeling like I got to talk about this stuff, and I've got to talk about it out loud so other people who think it's normal to never share or talk about things that are maybe a little bit ugly, embarrassing, shameful. Like, we were kind of taught as a generation to just hide it all and never talk about it. And so much of my work is to say out loud the things that everybody is thinking, by the way. It's like you say some of these things out loud sometimes, and people are like, oh, yeah, me too. And so I say, like, why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we saying those things out loud? It's interesting because it took me, I'm 47, it took me 40 some odd years to realize how much I was on my own as a kid.
I'm so glad you said that because I think that is a very common Gen X experience and our older parents, like the boomer generation, their experience too, that you keep things close to the vest, you keep things close inside. Don't share your dirty laundry, as you said, not only outside of the family, but sometimes inside the family too.
Totally, totally.
And just kind of suck it up and pretend everything's okay.
Right. Like if we don't talk about it, it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we just won't talk about it. It wouldn't even occur to us to openly discuss something that's uncomfortable or painful. And so I've had to kind of develop that skill as an adult where I say, no, we have to talk about this. It's painful and we have to talk about it. So that's kind of one memory. The other thing that I really have unearthed later in my life was, and I see a lot of commonality in this, was for the first 35 years of my life, I would say I had no friends. And of course, I had social circles and I was friendly with people, but my husband really pointed this out. He said, Vanessa, you have no friends. I was like offended. I was like, what do you mean I have no friends? I've got her and her and her. He said, yeah, but you don't share anything with anybody. They don't actually know you. You don't confide in anybody. And I was like, oh, you're right. I said, I have you. He said, oh, no. No. You can't have one person in the whole world that you confide in. You need to confide in people. And so I realized that I had basically been raised in this place of, similar theme, don't confide in people, don't share yourself, don't share the ugly parts. And then I realized, oh, I had this experience in high school where I was in a group of friends. I went to boarding school, so we were a rooming group. We roomed together one year, we roomed together the next year, and then when it was time to room together our senior year, they came to me as a group and they said, we are rooming together, but not with you. And I had never really focused on the fact that that might have had an impact on me at 17 years old. And in my mind, I always said, you know what? They have to live with the guilt of having done that. I'm over it. I had moved on. I moved on with my life. I didn't really dwell on it. I never really thought, oh gosh, that was so hurtful. But in a way, it was my sort of initial wounding of feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can really trust women to really fully reveal myself. And then I go back even younger and I realize, oh, I was a young girl and I was a ballerina, so I had good posture and I held myself in a certain way. And I remember the girls saying, oh, Vanessa, she's so high on herself. She's so full of herself. And I remember thinking to myself, unconsciously, I think, oh, I better make myself smaller. I better make myself less shiny. I better not stand up so straight. Maybe I'll hunch over and make myself a little bit smaller because then I'll be liked and I'll belong. And so now as an adult, I'm looking back at these kind of early childhood wounds of trusting women. And so maybe it made sense that until 35 years old, I had acquaintances and I had friends, but I never really revealed the full breadth of my heart. And then I got to a place where my whole world blew up. I got to a place where I had had 5 kids in 6 years. I had been pregnant, breastfeeding, or both for 8 years. I was absolutely at the end of my rope, exhausted, and I just cracked. And I realized I really cracked. I wanted out of my life. I almost lost my marriage, and I told no one. Not a single human being. Not my mother, not my father, not my brother, and not a friend. Nobody. Zero. And I was like, wow, I had no idea how lonely I had made myself. How I thought everything was fine and I was surrounded by people and I was socially successful and I was successful at work, but I was actually desperately lonely because I didn't trust anyone enough with that utter heartbreak to share it to reach out to get support. So fast forward now, I've spent the last 12 years unlearning all of that in hyper mode. And I can confidently say I have the deepest, richest relationships of my life. But every time I tell people that story about the mean girls, everyone has a story.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone I know has that story of when you put your heart into the world as a little girl and it just got stomped on, or it was death by 1,000 cuts of what the girls would say. And I'm here to say, boy, is it worth healing that, because my relationships with women are extraordinary, extraordinary, and they will carry me through the end of my days. And I've decided to dedicate essentially outside of my family most of my energy to building that community of women around me, because it's all I care about. It's all I want.
I'm so grateful you shared that story, and a couple of things I want to come back to in that. First of all, yes, so many women have that early wounding of being abandoned, rejected by female relationships in their lives. I have that. I had that epiphany actually in a Nushu group that I had with you about in first grade. My best friend just decided at recess that she didn't want to be my best friend anymore. So, and we don't realize it's so, and we don't see it back then.
Yeah.
Wait, it's not until we go back and reflect as you're doing. And the second thing I want to point out is that you are such a walking, talking example of doing that unlearning and that reflecting to go back and do that hard, deep work of healing so that we can see those wounds and really heal through that wounding to come out into the version of ourselves that we were really meant to be. And that wasn't always your path. You know, you said it hasn't been until the last 12 or so years that you've been doing that. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, and this kind of ties in with your reflecting back on how you grew up and some of the lessons you learned, that you seem to follow kind of the straight and narrow path early on in life. You went into Goldman Sachs, and that's a pretty traditional role, much different from what you are doing now, championing women's voices. And so back then, what drew you to Goldman Sachs at that time, and how did that chapter tie into what you were talking about and that breaking point that you came to?
Yeah, I mean, I was a down the line classic overachiever. You know, I was a straight A student. I worked really hard. Nothing but an A+ was acceptable. I joke with my mom now. She's Chinese. You know, what's a B? A Chinese F. You know, I'd come home with a 97%. She'd be like, what did you miss? I have an amazing relationship with my mom, and she was kind of like tiger-ish mom. She wasn't as bad as I'm making her out to be, but there was definitely that immigrant mentality of, you know, your education is incredibly important, and I'm so grateful for it. But I was that classic overachiever, teacher's pet, you know, went to Harvard, National Merit Scholar, National Championship squash. I was like eye on the prize. And that led me to Goldman Sachs because, you know, what were all the people who were overachieving at Harvard? What did they want to do? They wanted to go into finance. I was like, great, I got a job there. Honestly, I regret nothing. Goldman Sachs, 2 years at Goldman was some of the best training one could have for life. It's not where I wanted to end up, but I learned so many lessons. I met so many people who I admire greatly, and it was a tremendous experience. So none of it was wasted. None of it was lost. But I did get to a place where I realized that I had been working very hard to meet external expectations or kind of societal norms of what one should do and what was admired and praised for many, many years. Understandably, you know, you're a kid and you're taught in school that there are definitive measures of success as determined by grades. It's very black and white. You work hard, you do well, you get this grade, you get the praise, you get into the college of your choice, you do the same thing in college, you get into the job of your choice. And so there is a system that is set up that rewards this very specific way of being, and I was good at it, and I got a lot of success from it. Fast forward, I took 10 years off to have my kids. I got to a place where I felt that I needed something else. There was a creative energy inside of me. And this was also after this big breaking point, dark night of the soul. Who am I? I've lost myself. I have no idea what I need anymore. All I do is give. I have no idea how to meet my own. I mean, there was so much wrapped up in this. But coming out of that, and really gradually coming out of that, I shifted my mentality pretty substantially to say, I have this belief that I have a soul imprint, something that I'm meant to do on this earth. Came from a lot of sort of existential thinking about why was I given privilege, education, talent, intelligence, a childhood that was very stable. Why do I get to have all those things when other people don't? And I decided that I could go in one of two ways. I could either feel really guilty about it and for the rest of my life question why I get these things and other people don't, why the world is unfair, why I got all of these gifts, or I could say, I will never know why. I just know this is my incarnation and this is what I was put on the planet with. What am I supposed to do with it? What is my soul imprint and what is mine to do on this earth in my lifetime? And accept the fact that I'll never fully know why, and I don't need to know why. All I need to solve for is what's mine to do. And that process of figuring out what's mine to do really involved figuring out who am I and what lights me up. What unlocks the flow and the wellspring of creative energy in me? And I tell you, Michelle, it's getting more and more artistic, weirder and weirder, honestly. And less mainstream as I lean into that and keep giving myself permission to say, this really interests me over here. Let me figure that out. And I've gone through navigating a brand new world, but a world that has its own rules. So if sort of overachieving in finance, school in finance has its set of rules where there are measures of success. The self-help world also has its rule with its measures of success. And those rules are very much centered around credentials and expertise and attention and followers and all of these metrics that people use to decide, are you someone worth listening to or learning from? Nothing has ever quite felt exactly correct to me. I think that's part of the reason that I was really interested in facilitator training and groups, because part of the issue I've always had is the innate hierarchy in the teacher-student relationship. I'm a self-help teacher. I've got it figured out. If you do what I say, maybe someday you'll have my life. Now, that's an extreme and it's often unspoken, but that is often the dynamic. And I find it, even if the teacher has a lot of good things to say and is teaching good material, I find that dynamic fundamentally problematic and fundamentally unempowering. And so much of my work has been to say, this doesn't quite feel right and this doesn't quite feel right. Let me try this on. And so that's why I mean it's like getting weirder and a little more off the reservation, because a lot of the established ways of doing things have never quite felt right to me. And so it's an ongoing finding my way, finding my voice, figuring out what's right for me. But the process of, I think of it visually. Like I have a meandering path that is mine. And there are all these things that are trying to pull me off the path. And my job isn't necessarily to see the whole path ahead of me. My job is just to notice when something's trying to pull me off and quiet it. It's my job is to say, right, that might be an old story of mine that is messing up my clarity. Let me go look at that story so I can just say like, hey, old story, I love you, I got you, but like you're not in my lens right now. You're not clouding my clarity. To me, it's just like I don't know, people talk about peeling layers of an onion, or people talk about, I think of it as just like little micro shifts. And so people will say, what's next for you? What's in 5 years? I'm like, talk to me in 5 years. I have no idea what I'm going to learn between now and 5 years from now. I don't know what steps I'm going to take and what wanderings I'm going to have and who's going to be my teacher and what's going to happen. But I'm super excited for it. I'm here for it. I'm open to learning what happens between now and then.
I love that visual of the meandering path because it appeals to my mountain sense here in Colorado, but it's such a great visual for people to keep in mind because we're not always going to be able to see the path right in front of us. And all we can ever do is just take one small step. You mentioned there's a couple of things that I want to come back and unpack there. The first one, though, is about the creativity. Have you ever read The Artist's Way?
I haven't read it. I know about it. And my son is a musician, and I've actually meant to go read it with him in parallel. But yeah, I haven't read it, but I'm interested in it. And I think after this, maybe this is my little push to go read it.
It just, when you talked about creativity, reminded me of that because I'm on my third read of it and reading it in tandem with a friend of mine too, which does make it a more powerful experience, I think. And on this third read, it is the most powerful read through I've had of it. And it's exactly what you said. I find the creativity, weird things are happening as I read through it. So I think that's so true. As we learn to unlearn, we notice our creativity comes up a little bit more and things do get a little bit weird.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, that energy of creativity is a little bit of a tapping into energy, right? It's like what wants to come through me. That's almost not of me, but through me. And it requires a listening and a receiving and a downloading rather than a doing. And I think so many of us are so in the doing that we never hear it. But when we can quiet down enough to sort of listen and then also listen to the messages that might not be what we want to hear, because sometimes what we hear is like something that doesn't quite fit into our big picture of our life, but those whispers start to get louder if you pay attention to them. I just find that the best way to identify if you've tapped into that is it's just a feeling of energy and excitement. I will tell people joy is a guidepost, not a reward. If you are lit up about something, if something makes you joyful, if you're excited, if you can't stop thinking about it, go there and go check that out. Don't shut it down, because I think that so many of us are exhausted, not just because we're doing so many things, but because we're not allowing ourselves to feel inspired. Because the things that make us feel inspired don't make the list of the top 10 things we're supposed to be inspired by. And so we're just hacking away at these things that don't light us up, or we're hacking away at things that we're doing in a way that doesn't light us up and doesn't reflect who we are and how we operate in the world. And so I think part of the exhaustion I see is not just the amount of energy we're expending, but the lack of inspiration that we feel.
Absolutely. That's my experience and what I've witnessed in other people too is because of societal conditioning, societal cultural norms, family conditioning, all of the things, we don't feel like that's even on the menu for us to tap into our creativity, our inspiration. So there's something else I wanted to come back to because you kind of glossed over it when you said you took 10 years off to raise your kids.
Yeah.
You have 5 children, which is no easy feat. And I've heard you talk several times about the breaking point that you came to and how that was hard to wrestle with because you had the quote unquote ideal life.
Yeah.
You were successful, you had the family, the husband, the kids, the dog, everything. And so I wanted to focus in on that a little bit because I think that's also a very common experience with women, especially at this stage of life. Once we kind of get toward our 40s, late 30s, early 40s, when we start to hit that breaking point, but we just don't want to acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit more about what that breaking point was like for you and what came as a result of it.
Yeah, I mean, the breaking point just felt like I'm done. It just felt like I can't anymore. I'm absolutely done. I was completely numb inside. As I was telling my husband I was done and seeing the hurt on his face, it made me feel nothing. I was completely numb. And I think I was just so disconnected from myself. And I had been ignoring the signals for so long. And so, I think of women like me who are very capable. Women have been very praised for being capable. And women like that who are very capable of pushing down anything that interferes with what we're supposed to be doing. We are the athletes that run marathons on broken bones. And we just, we are a specific breed of woman who has for a long time gotten what she wants by being extremely good at ignoring and numbing pain. Anything that interferes with achieving her goals. And so any kind of an internal voice that said like, this is too much, you're too tired, this is asking too much. You need help. You need support. You feel alone. Any of those voices, I was like, I'm a pro. I am a pro. I don't need to attend to any of the internal signals that are telling me that this is not great for me. And so what happens with women like us, we either freak out like I did and just say I'm out, or we get sick, or our body freaks out for us on our behalf when it says to us, no more, you cannot. So imagine the number of women who are either mothers or not mothers, in careers or not careers, but have this kind of overachieving and perfectionist and don't complain personality, who go to a doctor in their 40s and the doctor says your adrenal fatigue is over the top. Your capacity to ignore your bodily signals that you might need some rest has been so consistently high that you have basically just shot your adrenals, that you are running on so empty for so long. And it's such a common thing. And something gives. At some point, something gives. And for me, I was like the steam pipe that had never let out even a tiny bit of steam because I was so capable of holding it together, and it just exploded. It was messy, it was ugly, it was confusing, it was hurtful. I felt numb. So it was a really, really ugly time. And I remember thinking to myself, everything is wrong in my life. I made all the wrong decisions. I married the wrong guy, which, by the way, I did not. My husband is amazing. I absolutely did not marry the wrong man. I shouldn't have had these children. I shouldn't live in New York. I don't want this life. I wanted to go live, I don't know. I had all these fantasies about this alternative life that was meant for me. And I remember being in Central Park and walking, and just my brain was awash. I had no idea what was going on. And I remember anchoring to one thing. And there was one thing I knew to be true, which was I'm not leaving my children. I'm not leaving my family. It's not who I am. It wasn't even, it's not a choice I would make. It was, it's not who I am. And I built everything up back from there. And what I realized really in retrospect was oftentimes when we have this inkling or we have this feeling inside, we have such a fear that it's going to blow up our life. We want to ignore it because the consequences of letting it out, because it's kind of built up and we know it's pretty powerful and we know it's a big thing, we think the consequences are the only way to resolve this feeling inside is to completely blow up my life, or the only inevitable consequence is to completely blow up my life. And because the instinct is my life is wrong. Everything around me is wrong. And so the only way to solve this feeling inside is to change everything externally in my life. And so we ignore it because that reality is too scary, because we don't want to hurt the people we love, right? Our life is built around the people we love. But what I realized really in retrospect is there was nothing wrong with the life around me. It was my relationship to myself inside that life that had the. So from this place of I'm not leaving my family, I'm anchoring down in that, I started to build up my life again. And I started to change my relationship with the people around me. I started to express to my husband my frustrations, or the places where I was swallowing things that I no longer wanted to swallow. I started to set boundaries with my kids. I started to not do the things in my life that I wasn't interested in, that I thought I had to do or that I should do. And I'm in the same life, but my relationship with it is completely different, and nothing got blown up. You know, I was lucky. My husband was very patient with me. And so I'm incredibly grateful to him for that, because he knew I was kind of going through it. And sometimes when you do find a deeper relationship with yourself and the truth, and you can see things clearly, things in your external situation sometimes do change. Sometimes you are in the wrong job or living in the wrong place or married to the wrong person. But what I find is that you don't do that to fix the problem. You get a relationship with yourself, and then those things become more and more and more clear. And it's not a big breach blow up moment. It's a eventually leaning into and figuring out, okay, I need to make some shifts in my life. But more often than not, really starting to build a relationship with self and understanding what your needs are, where they haven't been met, what you like, what you want, deepens your relationship with the people around you. So the very thing we're the most afraid of is the thing that usually often is helped by doing this work. But it took me, a big breach to figure that out, because it's
Yeah, and it's not an overnight process. We can sit and talk about it succinctly after the fact or even during, because it's a never ending process. And I want to highlight some of what you said because I think that's so important, again, because I believe so many women are in that same place. And so I want them to know what they can do if they are. And the first thing I heard you say is to find an anchor in yourself, something that you know to be true about yourself, your core essence. And then from there, you talked about expressing yourself more to your husband, setting some boundaries, finding your voice, talking to other people more. Are there any other practical insights or wisdoms that you can share for women who might be in that place of thinking they just need to blow up their life and they're not sure what to do?
Yeah. Number one thing I will tell people is that there are 3 questions that I ask myself on a regular basis and I offer to people, which is, how do I feel? What do I like? What do I need? What's interesting is I will ask women these questions and they're like, I feel tired. What do I like? And they'll either be blank or maybe they'll burst into tears where they're like, I don't even know what I like anymore. Because what I like has been so off the table for so long. I know what my partner likes. I know what my kids like. I know what my coworkers like. I know what everybody else likes around me because my ability to read into or sort of feel into what other people need, want, and like is extremely highly developed. But I never got to be part of that party. I never got to be sitting at that table. And so just the asking of the question, really sort of signals to ourselves how I feel, what I like, what I need matters. It's in the mix. It always has to be in the mix. And so I had a woman who shared with me that they've been going on the same vacation every single year, like clockwork. It's just understood. They go on this vacation, like her husband likes to play golf and they do this thing. And she was like, I hate it. I hate it. I don't even like that place. I don't like going. I don't like anything about it. He doesn't even know. I haven't even told him that I don't like it. So it's just this classic example of sometimes our partners don't even know, or the people in our lives don't even know because we don't know. We haven't even looked. And so just that very fundamental question, how do I feel? What do I like? What do I need? To put our preferences, our needs, how we feel back on the table. And nothing changes overnight. And for me, I think of everything as a practice that I commit myself to. This is my practice. My practice is to check in with myself every day or multiple times a day and trust that that's enough, that over time, things are going to change and things are going to shift, because when something is not looked at for a long time and you start looking at it, it starts to say, you're looking at me? Great. I'm going to go from being completely silent to a whisper. I'm going to go from a whisper to feeling comfortable having a voice in the room. And now I'm really online. So building that relationship with self can be as simple as just very regular, basic check-ins. It's amazing sometimes when I ask people to check in on how they feel, they will say, I'm so glad I checked in on that. I would have gone through the whole day not noticing that I'm feeling a little nervous about, I don't know, something going on over here. I'm feeling tired or and so for me, that's the start. There's no big magic bullet. It's just taking a second to check in and say, like, how's this feel to me right now?
The thing I really love about those 3 questions is that they are accessible for everyone. The single mom who's got 3 kids and she's working 3 jobs and on up the spectrum, because just starting there sometimes can be enough to really start to raise your awareness about the traps and the habits and the patternings and the ways that you don't have that relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And understanding, as you said, you don't necessarily have to quit all your jobs or leave your kids or leave your family or whatever it is, move halfway across the country. Start where you are with who you are, is what I hear.
And the other thing I'll say is, if you ask yourself those questions and you don't have an answer, that's okay. That's okay. You don't have to have an answer. The asking of the question itself is the work. The signaling to yourself, I can't really put my finger on how I feel. Sometimes when we ask ourselves these questions, the answers don't come in complete sentences and they don't come in tidy packages. So I don't want anybody to say, well, I don't really know what I like and feel bad about it. Like, no, it makes sense. If you have put other people's likes and other people's needs and other people's wants ahead of yours for a long time, it makes sense that you don't know what you like, but that's okay. You ask the question. And if you keep asking it, maybe one day, not right after you ask the question, but maybe one day at a separate time, you're going to do something and you're going to think to yourself, oh, I kind of like this. I kind of enjoyed that. That felt good. And so I really want those 3 questions to be just kind of a practice. And just like, some days you go to the gym and you're like super strong and you feel great. And some days you go to the gym and you're like, don't got it today. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You just keep doing it. And over time, you look back and you think, oh, yeah, no, I might not see it in the moment, but things change when you ask yourself these questions and you reiterate to yourself again and again, like how I feel matters, what I like matters, and what I need matters.
Right, because it can feel unsafe to start to ask those questions. If we have built a life around caretaking for others and prioritizing their needs, that's what we've learned feels safe. And so when we start to have that relationship with ourselves, that can feel very unsafe and triggering. And so the big takeaway is if you are someone and you start to ask yourself those questions and you can't come up with anything, there's nothing wrong with you.
No.
At all.
There's nothing wrong with you. And I also think, you and I live this and we know this so well. We're not meant to do this alone. We're not meant to do this in isolation. Like, it's like asking yourself these questions and sitting with yourself by yourself. This is not how we're built as human animals. And so it's this interesting dynamic where there's really only one person that can have a relationship with yourself and yourself, right? Like you're kind of on a solo journey, but you need to do that solo journey with other people. Nobody can give you your answers and nobody can solve it or fix it for you, but to be witnessed by and to be in community with other people while you're building that relationship with yourself is absolutely essential. And you and I have seen and witnessed the magic of sitting in a group and sitting with other women. But frankly, it doesn't have to be formal. It's friendships. Right now, I'm looking at the whole mental health space and we have more information than ever. And we're less well than ever. Because I think the thing that we haven't focused on is real friendship and community, people that you can trust with your stuff, who are just going to kind of listen to your stuff and say, I love you. That's it. Sometimes we don't need a big fancy explanation. We just need a hug. We need both. There's such a place for therapy and there's such a place for the mental health space. And I have so much respect for so many people doing that work. But I think we have underemphasized just having people to be with who are going to just stick with you and aren't going to try and fix you and aren't going to try and analyze you, or just going to say like, hey, that sucks. I'm so sorry. I'm here for you. Do you need a hug? Sometimes we just need a hug because life is hard.
Yeah. And that's such a beautiful segue into not only the work that you're doing now around women and friendships, but also how that evolved out of the work that you started with Nushu. So I want to talk about Nushu, and let's start by first telling people how Nushu came to be, how you got the inspiration for Nushu.
Yeah, so it's kind of evolved over time. But what happened was that when I started to look at my inner landscape after this big breach where I was trying to find my way out of it, I became so incredibly fascinated. I feel like I was sleepwalking through my life. I had no self-reflection of my inner landscape whatsoever, zero awareness. And then the second I became aware, it was like, oh my gosh, never have I ever been so fascinated by anything before as navigating the human existence while you're watching yourself navigate the human existence. So I got very, very curious and I read lots of books and I listened to podcasts and I had this creative energy inside of me that I had to do something with. And so I just started. People will say, I feel like I need to do something and let me figure out this big, bold plan and make a fancy website and have a business plan before I start. And I say, that is not how I started. I just started because maybe there are some people who have a vision and an idea and they have, point B that they want to get to, and they're at point A and they draw a straight line from point A to point B, but that was not my path. I just kind of started. So I gathered women, I brought in teachers, it evolved into facilitating group and teaching facilitator training. It's involved a podcast over the years, but there's one common thread in all of it, which is gathering people, mostly women, honestly, gathering women to be with each other in the journey of life. That's basically it. And through teachers and retreats and surfing and adventure, that's really the through line. And for me, everything I've received from all of my work in Nushu has been the relationships that I've built, the friendships that I've built, frankly. So it's not any fancier than that. It's being with women in a really open, honest way and creating a really empowered space to reveal yourself, take off your masks, go through the hard shit together, and do that in true community with other people, and allow yourself to be seen and known, and with love, be willing to see and know others. That's it.
And what does the name Nushu itself mean?
So Nushu in Chinese means women's language. I'm half Chinese and studied Chinese in college, and my kids are all studying Chinese, so we're very tied to that part of my heritage. So women's language, literally, but it was a language that women wrote to each other when they were denied education in ancient China. And they used it to communicate, but they also embroidered it on the inside of robes, silk robes, when they left the village, or they painted it on fans. So it was the secret hidden language of women that men couldn't read. And it's kind of almost extinct, although I think there's some scholars trying to sort of keep the history of this alive. But it's this beautiful, I mean, if you look it up on the internet and you put in Nushu, Chinese women's language, you'll see it's this beautiful written script. It's absolutely stunning. So that was the origin of the name.
I love that story. And you've mentioned this a couple of times, that there is facilitator training within Nushu. That's something that I went through. Mm-hmm. There are Nushu groups that facilitators have all over the country. And the Nushu groups are centered around the theme of space holding. And you've said that space holding is your superpower. So first of all, define what space holding is, because that's a new term for a lot of people. And then tell me how you came to realize that space holding was your superpower.
Yeah. So at its most basic, I think of holding space as being a loving witness to somebody and what they're going through without a need to fix or change anything about it. So this can take the form of somebody coming to you and telling you about something that's going on in their life and just being there to listen. This is such a fundamental human need to be seen and witnessed. But often what happens is we go in immediately to fix or help. I'll be in a room full of women and I'll be like, who identifies as a fixer? If there's 100 women, 20 women will be like, oh yeah, I'm a fixer. Okay. And then I'm like, who's a helper? And like 95 of the 100 women will raise their hands as helpers, because we associate that with a positive thing, which of course it is. But our need to feel helpful, our need to help others, our need to feel worthy based on what we provide for others is so strong that it can interfere with our ability to hold space for someone. So I don't know if anyone listening has that friend where you start telling them the story and they're just like immediately telling you what to do. And you're like, listen, just hold on a second. And they're like, well, I'm just trying to be helpful. And you're like, not helpful, dude. It's like, you don't get to say whatever you want if you say right afterwards, I'm just trying to be helpful. My intention is to be helpful. It's like, that's great. But this skill of being able to say, like, I can just let that be what it is without needing to fix it or change it is a very underdeveloped skill and a very powerful skill in friendship and also in the family dynamic, whether it's with your parents or with your children. I've especially found it very, very powerful with my children, especially my teenage daughters, where, the simple question of, do you want advice or would you like me to just listen, is an incredibly powerful question. But there's so many places in our lives where we either want to feel helpful or something that someone is telling us is making us feel icky, yucky. We don't like to witness the pain of the people that we love. And so what we do is we go in to try and fix it or change it or make them feel better, right? I just want to make you feel better. But the question is, Are you trying to make them feel better, or are you trying to make yourself feel better? Because it's very difficult to sit and witness someone else's pain, but it is such a gift to them. And there's such a steadiness that people receive from saying, I am capable of witnessing you and your pain. So that's why I think it's one of my superpowers, because I can sit quite steady with somebody telling me the darkest, most shameful, horrible things. And they can see in my affect, and they can see by the way they've interacted with me, like, oh, she can hold that. And so that part of me that I probably would edit for almost anybody, I don't need to edit here. And it's such a gift to be able to share things in that way. We have such a human craving to be seen in our entirety. And so I think therapy is a great place for this, right? Because the rules are already defined. It's like, this is the place where you are paying somebody to sit there and listen to you talk about the things that maybe you wouldn't share with other people. And that's part of what I love about therapy, because we have a craving to be seen. Because when it just lives inside our head, when it lives inside of us, we don't have any feedback on it. We can get very into a very bad spiral of self-criticism where we're starting to spin stories about, oh, I have this thought, or I did this thing, or I have this part of me, and that means I am. That means I am, rather than I have this part of me and somebody said, oh, I see you. That makes sense that you have that part of you. And then there's all these other aspects of you. It doesn't define you. So I think the interesting thing about holding space is how bad most people are at it, and how unconscious people are about the fact that they are shutting down people's willingness to be honest with them, to show themselves to them. I've really experienced this with my kids, where they have all gotten to this place in adolescence where they start to hide. They start to hide things. And I think what that has to do with is they start to have much more complex thoughts, and they are getting these signals that some of these thoughts or impulses or desire to do risky behavior that they're attracted to are bad. And they start to segregate the good stuff and the bad stuff. And they're like, the good stuff can be shown to people and the bad stuff must be hidden because it makes me bad. And so I've said to them over and over, I am the place you come to with those things. And I need you to trust me enough the first couple of times to tell me the bad stuff, the naughty stuff, the stuff that you're worried you're going to get in trouble for, because I need to prove to you that, like, my job is not to decide you're bad or punish me. My job is to help you and teach you. And so it's not that there's like no rules and there's like, it's a free for all and there's no consequences, but I am your safe place. You need to trust me. And I actually said this to my 13-year-old recently. I was like, go ask your sister and your brothers who are older whether you should hide things from me or whether you should tell me things. And he went and asked them, and they're like, oh, tell mom everything. Tell mom everything. Because that premise of saying, hiding parts of yourself because you've decided already that you're going to be rejected for it, or decided already that you're unlovable for it, is going to set you up for a lifetime of deciding, okay, let me cut out this whole part of me that doesn't deserve to exist. And I think it's the basis of so much suffering. And so that idea of being able to hold space. Now, let me tell you, Michelle, some of the stuff my kids have told me or said to me, I had to really dig deep, where I was like, I am not reacting to this. I am listening without a need to fix or change this in this moment, but by God, this is not for the faint of heart. It's like, there have definitely been moments where it's like, keep your cool, mom, keep your cool. And there have been moments where I've been like, I need a second. I need a minute. I'm going to get back to you on that. So I don't want to pretend that this is easy, because we obviously have, there's a lot of fears associated with these moments when we want to jump in and just make it go away, make that feeling go away. And it's really uncomfortable. But I think it's the number one underdeveloped but powerful skill to develop for improving interpersonal relationships.
I 100% agree. And it comes back, interestingly enough, to what you said about your childhood growing up and how you felt like you had to just keep so many things close to the vest. I mean, not only because we didn't want to share our dirty laundry, but because we're afraid of how we will be judged.
Yeah.
And so I think, first of all, not just the parent-child relationship, but all relationships that we have, but think of the power that that could have just on parent-child relationships if more parents were able to do that. And the good news is it is a skill that can be developed, as you've said. And I know that firsthand. And it's challenging. It's
really
learning,
hard.
it's unlearning all of the ways that we have learned to be a quote listener in our life. And I remember when we first started Nushu training, I think one of the first exercises we did was we paired up in a breakout room, and the exercise was just to listen to the other person without reacting. I mean, without nodding, without smiling. And it was so hard because my internal dialogue was, well, this person isn't going to know that I'm validating them, or if I agree, or I'm not making them feel better by just sitting here and listening.
Yeah.
And the opposite was true. And it's not that we are completely robotic as we sit and listen to someone, but I think we want to be aware of the ways in which we are conditioned and habituated to want to make other people feel better and reach into their space and try and fix them or help them. And all we need to do is a couple of key things you said. Number one, you can pause and say, I need to just come back in a minute. Let me come back. And number two, ask the question, what will serve you best? Do you want advice or do you want me to just listen? If more people just ask that question, we'd be better off.
Yeah. This comes up so often with me and my kids, and you said it's hard. And I think the reason it's hard is because looking at reality honestly is hard. You know, there's a reason our mind distracts and avoids. There's a reason we do that, because reality can be hard to be with and to face. But I think that our capacity to be really honest with ourselves about ourselves is the number one factor in our ability to change. And so that ability to sort of look at a situation and be like, okay, yeah, like I'm super activated here. Okay, yeah, like I'm not doing well. Okay, yeah, I see my self-criticism. To be able to really own all of that is really important. And I think when we're holding space, we're sort of saying like, I am willing to sit in the reality of what's happening here without pulling the escape hatch. Now, that being said, there is a certain level of self-regulation and tools you can use when you're like, I actually need an escape hatch right now, but I'm consciously choosing this escape hatch. It's too much for me right now. I'm choosing an escape hatch. It's a conscious choosing to say, this is too much for me right now. I need some support or I need a break, rather than an unconscious just flipping out of it. So I definitely want to make sure I'm not making anybody who's like, no, sometimes when reality is too real for me, I need to escape. Like, yeah, of course. Obviously, that makes total sense and is actually really a good idea. But when you're aware of the fact you're doing that, it makes a really big difference than when you're just unconsciously doing it. So I will often tell the story of my mom, who's a great mom. I was naughty-ish as a kid, you know? I was like,
I find that hard to believe for some reason.
I did all the things that teenagers did, but I was never off the rails, right? Like I smoked cigarettes and I like drank and I like smoked a little bit of weed. It was pot in those days. I know it's weed now, but it was pot in those days. But not a lot. And like I didn't know any hard. Like I was a pretty, yeah, but my mother thought I did nothing. She really believed I was like, you know, she was that parent. I joke about these parents. She was that parent which was like, the moms are talking about how the kids are drinking and smoking. She was like, not my daughter. She was totally that mom. I am not that mom, by the way. I'm like, yes, my kids too. No, but she was like, not my daughter. My daughter is perfect. My daughter doesn't do any of those things. And so years later, of course, I told her, Mom, I did all of those things, you know, and she was shocked. She couldn't believe it. But I was like a mom at that point, and it was funny. We were laughing about it. But I said to her, I said, you know, should I have told you at the time? She was like, no, you were right to lie.
Interesting.
Because she couldn't have handled it. And so a lot of times what we're actually doing when we're not telling people things is we're protecting them from the reality and the truth that they can't handle. And so that's what, like, if you can hold space for someone and hold that reality and truth, it is not an easy thing, but it's a real gift. And people aren't like, they're not necessarily lying to you to deceive you. A lot of times, and especially in all relationships, but especially with the child parent relationship, they're protecting you from the thing that they know you can't handle. And so much of me just trying to like keep my cool is like, I gotta just like hold it together with this little nugget of information my children have told me that I'm freaking out inside about. I just gotta keep my cool so that they believe that I can handle it. But there have been days when I've been like, it would be so much easier to not know any of this. It would be so much easier to be clueless and believe that none of this was happening. None of these risks were out there. It is, it is not for the faint of heart. It is a hard, hard path with respect to parenting, but in general, the life of being like, I'm willing to look at reality is a hard path, and it requires support, as do all things that are hard. It's so important to remember that we are capable of doing hard things, but we're not supposed to do them alone.
Yeah. And to be clear, we're not saying that you have your discomfort and then just stuff it down, right?
Yeah.
The gift isn't just to the other person. The gift is also to yourself, because it allows you to tune into, oh, I am actually feeling some feels about this and feeling a little triggered or feeling a little upset. I'm not going to show it to the other person right now because I want to create the space for them to feel like they can trust me to talk about this. And now this is good feedback for me to know what is alive in me. And come back to your 3 questions, how do I feel? What do I like? And what do I need right now? So to tend to yourself in that moment and not try to distract from that by fixing the other person.
Exactly. And it's like when you're holding space for somebody, you don't need to be like a backboard robot, right? Like you get to be a human being too, where you can say like, listen, I'm having a moment, I need a second, and you can go resource yourself elsewhere, right? And so, again, this comes up so much with my kids where I say, I'm not pretending that this isn't hard for me to process, but you need to know that I am solid and supported. I am solid and supported. I have my friends to talk to. I have your dad to talk to. So you don't need to worry about me. You don't need to caretake me. But like, I am also a human being who receives these things with some, some response or reaction. And so I like to say, I want to share that I'm humanly messy, but steady. And not steady by default, steady by design, right? Steady by getting the support I need, having the support around me, owning that I am not always going to hold it together for everyone, that sometimes I need to fall apart too, and that I have my own support system and my own permission to be human and my own permission to be messy. So I really appreciate that you bring that up, because I think that's a really important aspect of it.
Well, and again, I don't think the invitation here is for women to just immediately listen to this and go out and say, okay, now I'm just going to sit and listen to my child or my husband or my partner or my colleague or whatever and do nothing. Mm-hmm. It's a learned skill. And that's where the beauty of Nushu comes in. And so I want to invite people to check out Nushu. We're going to have the link in the website, and maybe do facilitator training, because even doing facilitator training just to use on a personal level doesn't mean you have to facilitate groups, but to learn those skills, to learn that skill of space holding, how to resource yourself so that you can be a space holder. Are there other benefits that you have seen women walk away from going through Nushu training, or some of the Nushu courses that you have that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much, of what people receive is their own space to be seen. And so it's an interesting dynamic where you're learning how to hold space for other people, but in turn, you're being held. And so I think, again, like I look at all of my work and the different things that I've done. And right now, actually, the offering I have is a how to hold space course that just outlines the basics. But so much of what I've really seen is that the relationships people build through doing this work, because similar people are attracted to it, feels like the most lasting legacy.
I can attest to that. There are still people from my Nushu training that I am in communication with, and just knowing that they're there and knowing that they know how to hold space for me, and vice versa, it truly is a valuable gift. So, and maybe let's use that to kind of shift over into the other topic that you mentioned, which is women in friendships, that I've seen you sharing a lot in your emails lately and on social media. So that's a big topic, women, especially at this stage of life, and friendships. And so what you mentioned that you realized that you didn't have friends like in your 30s, and that's something that you have worked on. And one of your emails recently said that you reconnected with your best childhood friend. So tell me why this topic of women and friendships feels so important, especially at this stage of life for Gen X women.
Yeah, I've had a couple of kind of aha epiphany moments in my life. And one of them was this moment where I envisioned my deathbed, which seems sort of macabre. But I kind of thought to myself, and I had read The 5 Regrets of the Dying, and it was very, very interesting. And I kind of envisioned it, and I said, what do I want for that moment? And I want to be surrounded by the people I love with no regrets. And I had this epiphany where I was like, if I want that, I have to start immediately. There's no such thing as too late, but I think anything other than immediately is not right. Like the moment you have that realization, you're like, I have to build that from now. I have to start now to be able to build that for the future. And so much of what I do is envisioning the reality I want for myself and then saying, go create it, Vanessa. Nobody's handing it to you. Go create the reality you want for yourself. And so this takes place in so many different ways, from meeting somebody on the interwebs and on Instagram and saying, I feel like I have a connection with you. I want to be your friend. And then just going and making that happen through connections and making an effort. And, it's kind of like courting people. It's kind of like dating people. You sort of say like, I'm really interested in you and here's who I am. And like, it's like, want to be my friend? It's like that thing on the playground where you go out and you see somebody and you tentatively sort of say like, hey, want to play? And so much of my life is like, hey, you want to play? I like your energy. I like what you're doing. I think I could enjoy you. Again, leading with this idea of like, what feels good? What do you like? Who do you like? And being a little bit brave to over and over again say like, hey, you want to play? And then creating the situations or the structures for that. So when we're kids, we've got so many opportunities. We play on sports teams, or we're in a theater production, or we're in school, or we're in a club, or we're at, whatever activities we do, there's these built-in structures for make friends through play. Make friends through activities, make friends through common interests. And then we get older and we get very siloed in our work, or we get very siloed in our nuclear family, and we don't have those opportunities. So, okay, we got to go create those for ourselves. And so much of what I do is take the things I like. I'm like the anti-gatekeeper. I want my friends to be into everything I'm into because I want playmates. I want people to play with, So I'm like, come rock climbing with me, come surfing with me. I've taught all my friends, not all my friends, turned a bunch of my friends to crochet because I'm obsessed with crochet. So it's like, what do I like to do? I don't want to do it alone. And let me rope everyone in. Let me go find the people who want to be in the conversations I want to be in, and let me create a space to have those conversations. So I host a lot of salons for book authors, but this could take any form, right? If you're like a hiker, I know you're a hiker. It's like there's a hiking group, or if you're somebody who likes to read books, it's a book group. And I see this opportunity to make a little effort to create the reality you want for yourself, which for me was to have fun with, me, love, and get to know and deepen my relationships with women so that I can have this very dynamic, robust community around me that when, stuff is hard, I have built the foundation for. But so much of it, I think, is based on play and fun and enjoyment, which, I think if you say to most women in their 50s, it's like, how do you prioritize your time? Fun and enjoyment is not at the top of the list. And I think it's such a lost opportunity to connect with somebody easily. I have a lot of people say like, I don't know how to make friends. It's like, don't worry about making friends. Go find something you like to do and organize it. And people might be like, oh, I'm so grateful that you organized that. invite people to join you. Maybe it's a card game, or it's mahjong, or it's, doing a cooking class, or it doesn't even matter what it is. You don't have to spend money. But if you want to be surrounded by people, you got to work for it. You got to make an effort. And I think starting with something you enjoy doing with other people who enjoy doing it is a pretty easy way to start.
Tell me about the concept of Moai.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an idea that I've been really, really interested in lately. So in Okinawa, which is one of the blue zones, there are Moai, and these are women who are grouped together at a young age. And initially it was to create a social safety net or a financial safety net where a number of girls would pool their resources. But these Moai are for life. So there are Moai in Okinawa with members in their 80s and 90s that have been going for 80 years. And so through illness and losing spouses and other issues, this Moai has stayed together, and they sit and they chat and they do things together. And they are basically this chosen family of sisters. And I had this, I've been talking for a long time with my women about like the women's commune that we're going to create. I just didn't have the name for it.
I was say the same thing.
And like everybody I tell, they're like, I'm in. And so it's like we're onto something here where it doesn't even have to be a physical place. It's this concept of, it's this mutual understanding over our lifetime as we get older, that we have a support network that is here for each other. And so you'll see some modern Moai. I'll give you examples like the Golden Girls.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Moai. Friends, that's a Moai. I've been watching the show Virgin River, and there's a sewing circle there, and that's a Moai, right? Like they get together and they sew together. They sit and they sew together. But really what they do is when somebody gets sick or somebody loses their farm, or this is fiction, right? But they're there for each other. And that's all I want. That's what I want. And that takes precedence over any achievement or accomplishment. It's like, I know I got my eye on the prize, and women, that's the prize. That is the prize. I think there are a lot of women who are older, sitting there in their homes alone, maybe relying on other people to take care of them who they don't want to take care of them, like their kids maybe. And there's not this reciprocity that I think is really capable of when women take care of each other. And honestly, we're really good at it. It's like, if you want to, I often will say, like, I just want to be cared for the way I care for others. And who's capable of that? The other women who are in the same way, so attuned to what other people need and want and how they can meet those needs. And let's spread that. Let's spread that burden. It's not a burden, but let's spread that out over a group so that we can adjust for the, like, this one needs support. This one can come and support, right? Like, let's spread that out over a group of women. Listen, this is easier said than done. Friendship dynamics are challenging and life is hard, and it's not an easy thing, but I don't know that people see that as the prize. That's really what I want to change. Like, I want people to see that as something really worthy to work for. People think about career goals that they spend so much energy working for. That's awesome. I'm totally in favor of that. Like do your work in the world. And people think of kind of nuclear family goals, and they put a lot of energy into that. I'm all for that too, but like there's something here where there is a collective support network that can be cultivated, but we're not really taught to want it.
Yeah. And first of all, I love that you brought in the concept of Moai, because that just lands very deeply in me, because it isn't something that we're taught. And I think I've both experienced and read about how hard it is to develop friendships starting from our 40s and beyond. And there, I think, a variety of reasons for that. And it also becomes all the more important because as somebody who's single, Winnie's not going to take care of me when I get older, my dog, right? She takes care of me now. But I've thought about that a lot. Like, who are the women that I want to be surrounded by so that we can take care of each other as we get older? And so I think that's such a beautiful concept. And I'm curious, why do you think it is Or do you think, or do you agree with the notion that it's harder to develop relationships when we're in sort of like our 40s and beyond? Do you agree with that? And if so, what do you think is part of that?
No, I mean, I think that there's an amazing opportunity right now for women of our age to build relationships with other women because we're a little bit over the hump of having to focus our energy or being told we're required to focus our energy elsewhere. I think we're a little bit at that point where, I mean, at least I am. I'm so done with people telling me what I need to do, what I should do, who I should be. We know who we are more than ever before, and we know what we want. I think, at least I can speak for myself, more than ever before. I think my 40s are awesome. I think my 50s are going to be better. We're just getting better and better and better, and we're getting more honest, and we're getting, I think, less afraid to show ourselves warts and all. So I actually think I would like to think there's a great blossoming of female relationships that becomes more possible in our 50s. I look at my daughters who are teenagers and I look at the early years, and there's such a drive to belong. It's like if you look at a seventh or eighth grade class of girls, they're all wearing exactly the same thing because they're terrified of being kicked out of the tribe. This is our very fundamental need to belong, and I completely understand it. And I think that continues in our 20s and our 30s, where we're sort of really trying to fulfill this vision of who we're supposed to be to get to belong. And then we get into our 40s and we're like, ugh, I did that. I'm over it. I cannot anymore. Like, I just cannot anymore. And there's a realness, I think, that is setting in for a lot of Gen X women where we just, am I allowed to swear?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very
We're
cuss-friendly
like,
podcast.
we are like all out of fucks to give.
Yep. Yep.
We have used them all out. We have used them all up. It's like, I am out of fucks to give. I've used them all up. This is who I am. And listen, I'm not pretending that I don't have fears and insecurities and like, but there's something different. There's something different, I think. And I think that my work, I think, is to say all the stuff out loud that we're all thinking. And that's actually my next project I'm working on, which is pretty exciting, is like for the Gen X women, I have all these conversations in private about all these things where we're like, we're all thinking it. But no, it's not so many people are saying it out loud. And I think we have a real opportunity to sort of connect on that level and bond over our honesty, of our willingness to say like, hey, this is what's up for me. Here's who I am. And so in some ways, I think there are great opportunities for deepening friendships at this point in our life. We know more who we are. At least I can speak for myself. I know much more who I am. And so any friendship that you build now is with who you actually are rather than with your avatar of who you've been trying and pretending to be. And so that's the basis, I think, for real connection and real friendship where, I think there's 3 layers of friendship. One is like the people you can go to in your hard times. Those people are precious. And then there's the people that you can go to when things are great for you. That's like an even rarer group, right? Because you all have those friends who are like, I'm here for you in the tough times. But when you're shining, I'm not so crazy about that. Then I think there's a 3rd layer. It's like, who can I come to with my ugliest? With my petty, jealous, nasty, lowest self. And those are my shame spiral friends who I call when I'm like, let me tell you what I thought today. I am the worst, most horrible person. I am disgusted with myself. And they'll be like, oh, baby, I love you. Thanks for sharing. Like my deep shame spiral friends where I'm like, let me tell you the latest of the ugliest, nastiest corner of myself today. And they can hold that too. And I hold it for them. And it's like, okay, now we're really getting honest and down to business of how to build a real relationship based on bringing your whole self online, the pretty bits and the nasty bits, and the other person trusting you enough to do the same. Like those are the ride or dies who will get you through the ugliest periods, because the ugliest periods aren't always when something ugly is done to you. It's sometimes the ugliest periods is when something ugly is coming out of you. those are sometimes the hardest ones. And someone who can stay steady with you through that, who can wade through that with you, that person's a keeper.
Yeah, those are little diamonds that you need to hold on to. I have
Yeah.
friends in all three groups and cherish each of them.
Yeah.
By the way, I got goosebumps when you said creating something, especially for Gen X women, to say all the things out loud. Like, that gave me goosebumps. So that always indicates to me that there's something there, and count me in for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, I kind of want to bring this back full circle, because you said, especially in our 40s and beyond, we're all out of fucks to give. And so let's also apply that to building our relationships, and coming back to something you said earlier about playing, and let's just find people who we can play, and I like your energy, and let's connect. I have just recently even reached out to someone on Instagram who I just got that hit. I'm like, I like their energy. I feel like they have a story to share. I'm going to reach out to them. And so a lot of people wouldn't do that. And I want to say, like, apply that. I don't have any fucks to give to that.
Yeah.
Just start reaching out to people, just going out and play and saying, I don't have any fucks to give. I'm just going to play and see what happens.
Yeah. And I see how that's really scary. There's like always that risk of rejection. And so I think part of the practice is, you can't go from 0 to 100 overnight. So, but something that's a little bit uncomfortable and out of your comfort zone, like, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And the more you do it over and over, it becomes more comfortable. It's like the first couple of podcast interviews I ever did, I was like sweating buckets. I was so I'm like really an introvert. I was like nervous. And now you do it over and over and over again. And now it's like so comfortable. And so things that you haven't done before aren't easy. And actually every little step you take is a victory that you should be like proud of and congratulate yourself for. Like, every time you do something that's a little bit out of your comfort zone, like reaching out to someone, or inviting people to do something with you, or saying like, hey, you want to grab a coffee? Like, we don't really know each other that well, but I'd like to get to know you more. Like, it's scary. It's a scary thing to do, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it to risk a little over and over and over again to have the possibility of a real connection.
I'm glad you mentioned that you're an introvert, because I don't know that people would pick up on that, given all that you do and all the healing that you've done and how you put yourself out there and find your voice. And I think a lot of times people who do feel more introverted feel like they can't do those things. And so what wisdom would you have to share for somebody who thinks they are a little more introverted or like to isolate a little bit more? What would you want to share with them?
I mean, I put myself out there, but what people might not know is this is my office. I spend the majority of my day alone in my office, thinking, puttering, doing work. And I am very conscious about the amount of time I spend out in the world in groups of people, because it really depletes me. And I love it, but it depletes me. And so I'm not trying to be an extrovert, and I don't schedule my life as if I'm an extrovert. It's like, what do I need? How do I feel? And what do I like? I really like people. I need breaks in between. I need to look at my week and say, how much of this can I do? And what is my work going to be in the world given who I am? And so this project that I'm talking about is basically a way that I've figured out to communicate with a lot of people while sitting in my office by myself. It's like I want to both be in conversation with people and be by myself. And I'm like, oh, I figured out how to do that. So and I say this to my kids all the time. It's like, you don't shift who you are to fit into the world and the way the world wants you to be. You have the ability to build a world around you that adapts to who you are on the inside. So many of us are shape-shifting ourselves to fit into who we're supposed to be, rather than saying like, I actually have the power little by little to adjust the world around me, to set my own rules for my life. That's another part of midlife that I think is so awesome. It's like, there were a lot of rules for us, and I'm done with them all. I am making my own rules from now on. This is how I want to live. This is how I operate. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do. There's so much work around boundaries of like so many things that I used to do that I'm just not willing to do anymore. That phrase, I am no longer willing, is so powerful for me. I am no longer willing to fill in the blank. I got pages and pages and pages of things I used to do without questioning it. And then I got to a place and a point where I was like, nope, I am no longer willing. So it's like toxic energy. I'm not even like in the same state as that. Like I won't even glance in that direction. I got too much life to live to be wrapped up in that. And so I am an introvert who loves to live in the world of ideas with people and be in community and conversation with people. And I've found my little right-sized way to do it that works for me, that gives me both sides and leaves me not completely depleted at the end of the day. And I still do things in rooms with people. I just can't do it all day, every day, or I'm like a puddle on the floor.
Yeah. Because whether someone's an introvert or extrovert or in the middle as an ambivert, everybody experiences loneliness. Everybody. That's a common human condition. And everything that you've talked about and the work that you're doing through Nushu and through cultivating the women's relationships, it's all about getting at that loneliness. And I know that you've talked about that before too. So can you speak just a little bit so that people understand that you can feel lonely in your family, in a group of people?
I mean, I was surrounded by people and I was deeply, deeply, deeply lonely. And so, I've thought a lot about, what is loneliness really? And to me, it's an inability to show yourself to somebody, an inability or unwillingness or not having a place to show yourself to someone. We have such a fundamental need to feel seen and known as human beings. And so if you're surrounded by people, but nobody really knows you, nobody really understands you, nobody really sees you, you can be, externally, you can present as someone who's got lots of support and lots of people around you, but internally you can feel very, very, very alone. And so that feeling of being seen for who you are, being known for who you are, and being accepted and loved for who you are, I think is the antidote to that loneliness. Of course, there are two sides to that. You need to find somebody who is there and willing to do that. But also there's your own side, which is you have to be willing to show yourself. And so even if you have people who are willing to see you, if you aren't able to show yourself to them or you're not willing to show yourself to them, you can't connect at that level. Again, I really don't want to diminish how hard this is, how vulnerable this is, how much courage it takes. And to a certain extent, how much ongoing inquiry it takes to say, like, who am I and what is true and what is real for me? And so, sometimes the simplest concepts are actually the most challenging, complex, nuanced, difficult. So in no way am I making light of this. This is the hardest work we'll do, is to discover who we are and then have the courage to show it to another. But the risk has, for me, it's again a practice, because I was a total hider. I was a hider. And so often, our greatest pain sits right next to our greatest gift. It's like that deep, 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 deep loneliness is the thing that started for me an understanding that because I was taught to be a hider and a liar, that my life's work is to be a revealer and to be honest. And so it's like every day is a practice of doing the opposite of what I want to do again and again and again and again and again, probably for the rest of my life. But the rewards I've received from doing that, which I don't think I kind of understood at the time. I think it was almost just like, if I don't start to show who I am, I'm going to completely disappear. It was just a visceral, I can't lie anymore. I just cannot hide and lie anymore. I can't do it. I gotta say it. Michelle, you and I have seen this in group again and again. If you give people the permission and the conditions to feel safe, to say what's inside of them, people are desperate to say it. We're not supposed to hold these things inside. It feels so good to just say something that you've been holding, and so often in these groups, people have said, my gosh, I just realized, like, I've never told anybody this. I've never said this out loud. And then the process of saying it out loud and being witnessed and having that external feedback of, oh, I just said this out loud and everything's still okay, right? Nothing went up in flames. I didn't lose just the act of saying it out loud. And yet it takes a lot of courage to do that. So I don't know where we started and where I meandered off to, but I just,
no meandering at all.
Yeah.
In fact, again, that kind of perfect segues into something else I wanted to mention. One of your emails recently, which I really encourage people to sign up for your email list, because your emails are in and of themselves just a beautiful invitation into self-exploration. And you shared recently how Dolly Parton inspired you to step into your diva era.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see if you could share a little bit more about that.
I am such a huge fan of Dolly.
Who isn't? I mean,
she's so amazing. You know, she's had so many struggles in her life, and so many people have beaten her down, and she's just, you know, thrived through it all. And something she said was like, I know who I am. I love who I am. I love what I do. And there was just this confidence in, you know, I don't have to be so humble. We all think we need to be so humble. Like if you put yourself out there and you're like, I think I'm amazing. I think I'm fantastic. I think my work is great and I love what I do. People might be like, oh, she's high on yourself. Here's my initial wounding, right? Like, and I really have started to realize like, I think I'm smart. I think I'm kind. I think I have things to say. And really stepping into the diva era is saying, I think that what I have to say is valuable enough to get other people to support me in that. Right? So we think of the diva as like the music star who like doesn't do anything for herself. Like someone's putting her shoes on and somebody's like, you know, and so that has this negative connotation. But I wanted to flip it to say, it has such a negative connotation to ask for people to support what you're doing because you actually believe it's good. And so many of us are like, oh, no, I'll do all of the things myself and I'll keep it small and I'm not going to hire a team and I'm not going to ask for support and I feel bad asking somebody to do the admin, or I feel bad asking somebody to support my dream. And I've really flipped that completely, where I think to myself, no, I am going to ask people to support my dream and what I do. And there's another place where I really figured this out, and that's with my son. So many parallels here. He's a musician. And when he was applying to school, he had to put together a portfolio for the music program. And so he was the creative, he was the artist, and I was the support. I was like moving the lights and plugging the stuff in and getting him water and doing all these things. And he was sitting there as the artist because I recognized that it's very hard to be in your artist and to be in production at the same time. So I was like, let me be production. Let me make sure the lighting is right and get the camera right and turn the camera on and go computer and plug the things in and get you water and do all of the support things so that you can be in the seat of the artist. And I realized it's not that I'm not willing to or capable of being production, of being support. It's not like I'm better than, but if I want to be in my artist, I need to let somebody support me in that in the same way that I support my son in him being his artist. So it's not that I'm better than anybody. It's that in this role, let somebody have the joy of supporting me in the same way that I have joy in supporting my son and his artist and allowing that creativity to be. So it's been a road because I think for women, it's very hard. It's very hard to be like, I need to conserve my energy so that I can be in my creative and I can be in my artist. And so I am going to allow you to take care of the details of this event that I'm speaking at. Right? It's like I am going to watch my team move chairs at an event that I'm then going to be interviewing someone at because I'm sitting and thinking about the interview. It seems like that wouldn't be uncomfortable for me, but I imagine women are like, ooh, that would be super uncomfortable for me. You'd be like, oh, let me help. But then you're in the moving chairs and then the person comes on and you're on stage and you have to interview them and you're not in the right frame of mind. So that diva era is about saying like, I'm going to be comfortable sitting here like a diva and looking at my notes to prepare for this interview or this speech I'm giving while I watch other people moving chairs and believe that that's okay. That's actually okay. Knowing that, you know, my daughter has a jewelry company and I'm on the production line. So like in that situation, I'm the grunt work, right? So it's not like, oh, I'm too good for grunt work. It's like, no, I'm not too good for grunt work. I'm super happy to do grunt work. But in that situation, that's not my role. And I need to be okay with that not being in my role. It's like even uncomfortable for me to describe it in this way, but I keep telling people over and over so that hopefully one day it doesn't feel so uncomfortable for me.
I love a good flip of the script, and that's awesome. That gave me some big light bulbs myself, and actually comes back to the artist way around how Julia Cameron talks about protecting that kind of infant creator, that because we haven't often allowed it to grow, and we have to be really protective of that little inner creator that we have, because that creative energy is a big expenditure. So I love that. I'm going to start incorporating that myself. And by the way, your son's music, I'll put a link in the show notes. He has a website. I know he has Spotify, right? But he also has a website. I listened. What was the first song? It totally just left my head that he just released a few months ago.
He's got 3 songs out: Pillow, Faded, and La Di Da.
Pillow, I listened to nonstop for several days. He's fantastic. Thank you. So I will make sure to include that in the show notes too.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll kind of start winding this down a little bit, but I wanted to focus on some of the programs and offerings and retreats that you're offering. And tell me, first of all, because we're going to have 2 links to websites in the show notes. You have Nushu.com and VanessaCornell.com. Mm-hmm. So can you tell me the difference between the work that you're doing those, or if there is a difference?
Yeah, so like here's where we're going to be really honest and transparent. I hid behind Nushu for a long time. I was like, I'm not a thought leader. I don't have anything to say. I just hold space for people. And so putting a VanessaCornell.com website out there was an part of my own evolution and part of my own coming out of the shadows. And so that is the primary now, is VanessaCornell.com, and really focusing on the idea that I don't have to hide behind something else anymore. It can just be me. And this new project, it's called Voice Notes from a Friend. And it's really just me sharing 5 to 10 minute reflections on, daily things that resonate with me, that I hope will resonate really with GenX women and what we're kind of dealing with the goal of saying things out loud that everybody else is thinking, and just starting that conversation. So it's not quite out yet. I don't know when this will come out. We'll figure out the logistics of that, but I am looking for early people to just come into the space and tell me what they think, kind of beta testers. And so if any of your listeners are interested in that, I'd be super, super appreciative of people just letting me know what they think. I think that it's a space I'm really excited about. It's the meest thing I think I've ever done, and feels really, really great and really intimate in a way that other mediums haven't felt as intimate. So I'm super excited about it.
I'm excited about it. Voice Notes from a Friend. Yes, please. Make sure to let me know. This episode is probably going to come out early to mid-May. So I don't know what the timing will be there, but we'll make sure to put a reminder in the show notes.
Thanks.
So you have various courses and retreats. You do surf retreats, which it's my goal to someday come on one of your surf retreats, although I'm like the least coordinated person ever, but I still want to try. And you do one-on-one work with people. You do group program. So I really invite people to check out the information on your website. And you have a free course, one that I noticed too, that I'm actually put on my to-do list to watch. And I think you mentioned it a little bit ago. It's the masterclass for holding space for your inner child, actually. So maybe that's different from what you mentioned earlier. But it's a free 40-minute video that folks can watch that is on your website. So I'll make sure and link that. And you have a fabulous free download for our GenX listeners that's called the 5-Minute Self-Care Challenge. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's basically the practice around those 3 questions every day. It's just that baseline, where do I start place? And it explains a little bit more about how to do it. It gives a little bit of resources and worksheets. But it's really that, like, if you're a listener and you're like, where do I start? That to me is the easiest and most accessible place to start. And so I always like to give that to anybody who's interested in starting this work and doesn't know where, because it's really, really worked for me. Hopefully something that feels supportive rather than on a to-do list, because it's like we all have that stack of books and that all those things that we feel like we should do, which isn't super helpful. So I've designed it to hopefully be not shame-inducing, just supportive.
Yeah. Well, it comes back to what you said earlier, I think, which is we want to, number one, recognize that all of these things are practice that we've talked about. And number 2, it really becomes a way of life as opposed to a to-do list.
Yeah.
We don't think of brushing our teeth as something we have to do. It's just something we incorporate into our day.
That's right.
And yeah, so learning how to do many of these things to learn how to be in a new way of life. So tell us where we can find you, and then we'll move into a lightning round. So tell us where people can
So
connect with you.
the best place to find me is vanessacornell.com or at Vanessa Cornell on Instagram. And my newsletter is the place if you want to find out what's up and what's happening. It's pretty simple. I don't overwhelm people with emails, but that's where I tell everybody about what's going on there on Instagram. So it's simple places to find me.
Is there anything that I forgot to ask or that we didn't cover that you want to share?
No, it was so thorough, and I loved it because often people who interview me on podcasts don't know me that well, and you know me so well. So it was super fun. I loved it. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I love the conversation too, and I hope that people really check out your work, because I think your work is part of what we need in this society for women to find true liberating empowerment within themselves. And so, yeah, that's the invitation that I hope people take away from this.
Thank you so much.
So let's do a quick lightning round if you're game.
I'm game.
All right. What is your fondest Gen X childhood memory?
I saw these and I wrote these down because I was like, I'm going to forget.
I think you're the first person who's actually written down answers.
Oh, really? Oh, really? Okay.
Most people forget.
Okay. So it's a movie reference. Some Kind of Wonderful.
Oh, yeah. The anniversary of that was just yesterday.
All I care about in this whole damn world is me, my drums, and you. I don't know why that is singing in my ears recently, but it's like on repeat in my head is this like moment where like, when you watch movies and there are these moments in these movies where you're just like, I understand the world just in this split second. And that was one of those moments for me.
I just rewatched that movie a couple months ago. I love it. And I misspoke. It wasn't that movie. It was Say Anything, that the anniversary was yesterday. But Some Kind of Wonderful is one that I rewatched a couple months ago, and it still hits. It still hits.
So good.
Absolutely. What's the biggest piece of advice for other Gen Xers going through transition?
I mean, I think I've said it for the last hour and a half. It's like work on your friendships and your relationships with women. Dedicate time and energy and focus to that, because it will repay you in spades in a way that other things won't. It's like when you raise your kids, they're not supposed to repay you in spades, but those relationships with women are going to become more and more and more important and create the energy and the time for them.
Your favorite Gen X era word or phrase?
I really struggled with this one. I went to a boarding school and we had our own lingo. So, again, it's like movie references. It's like, I just, clueless, like as if. It just, the kids have their whole slang now. And that's a good one,
That is a good one.
That was one that I really liked. I
like that one. I don't think anybody's mentioned that. I love it. Do you have a Gen X era theme song for your life?
So I didn't know what the song was, but it was 100% Madonna. Definitely Madonna. I remember I had the tapes, like a Virgin, True Blue, and I'd play them over and over and over and over again. And so like, maybe it's like a Virgin. I'm obviously not a virgin. I have 5 kids, but that song and that vibe, she was so rebellious and cool and free and empowered. Yeah. Kind of all Madonna.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think this is what Madonna meant by that song, but I can kind of take it to a deeper meaning and see why it still resonates with you. It's sort of like a beginner's mindset, like if we can approach everything with a little bit of a virgin mindset.
Yeah.
It's a good way to go through life. And what do you most appreciate about being a Gen Xer?
This, like, I don't care anymore. That like I'm so over it. And what I resent most about it is the life force and the time that it's taken from me pursuing all of these external goals and all of this stuff. And I'm so done with it. It's like, you don't get that anymore from me. Like my life force is all for me now. And so it feels like earned through a little bit of struggle and suffering and heartbreak and heartache. And, I didn't come by it without a struggle, but I feel like I have more agency and freedom than I've ever had before.
That's a beautiful place to leave it. And the big message that I hope a lot of women take away is that it is possible to find more agency and freedom, especially for this next stage of life. We are just getting started, and you're a great example of that. So thank you so much for spending this time with me today and for, again, the beautiful work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It was a blast.
That conversation with Vanessa really ignited some sparks in me. It ignited the spark to want to remember to continue to deepen the connection with myself, especially by stopping throughout the day to ask those 3 questions that she posed. It ignited the spark to want to build those deep, lasting friendships for this next chapter of life by just doing things that I enjoy and asking other people to come play with me. And it really ignited the spark to learn how to flip the script on the diva era and how I can step into that diva era as a 53-year-old woman, by the way. So I'm curious, share with me, what was your big takeaway from this conversation with Vanessa? Leave it in the comments wherever you're listening, or send me an email at podcast@lifefromthesummit.com. And don't forget to check out the show notes and grab Vanessa's free download, the 5-minute self-care challenge. And hey, Gen X ladies, let's step into our day, into your office, or even just around the house. Step into it like you're stepping into your new diva era. And until next time, stay gold, Gen Xers.